NFL teams that win the turnover margin generally win the game nearly 70% of the time. In this year's playoffs, we've had 7 games where there's been a turnover discrepancy between the teams. In all 7, the one with the positive margin won. Depending on who you ask, football is many things. It's a game of inches, a game of leverage, of execution, but more than anything, it's a game of field position. And the thing that affects that portion of the game more than anything is turnovers. And look, I know I'm not saying anything new. I'm not under the impression that game of field position is some brilliant line I made up that will one day find its way onto a quote card. I also realize that you probably already know that turnovers are, well, important. Hell, even if you know nothing about the sport, just read the room after an interception or fumble. As grown adults hoot, holler, hug, and high five, or groan, sigh, and wonder aloud why they've been cursed to such a miserable fate.
I'm fucking tired! I'm fucking losing!
You'll get the sense pretty quickly that, yeah, they're a pretty big deal. But just how big of a deal are they? How much did Lamar Jackson's second quarter fumble kill the Ravens' chances in their battle with the Bills? Was Jamison Williams' interception the worst turnover of the whole playoffs? To answer those questions, we must first add a value to how much a turnover is worth that varies based on the situation in which it occurred. This is where EPA, or expected points added, comes in. We've gotten to a point where NFL analysts and writers will throw around the acronym EPA without much explanation of what it means. And I think it's easy to just go on autopilot with advanced metrics. My rule of thumb? If Mina Kimes said the EPA of something was a positive number, then it was good. If she said the EPA of something was a negative number, then it was bad. And that's easy to do because 1, I trust her NFL coverage, and 2, I'm a simp. But I think it's worth taking an extra minute to go over how EPA is calculated and get on the same page of what it means. So, every drive in a football game is a beautiful, unique little flower, each having a chance to produce points for the offense. As they move the ball downfield with runs, passes, and penalties, their chance to score increases. No matter where you're at in your advanced stat journey, this part makes sense. You're more likely to score at the opponent's 10-yard line than you are on your own 25. What EPA does is assign a value to that chance to score, based on field position. Let's use a really simple example. Now, you can't snap the ball when you're already on the goal line, but for this thought exercise, let's imagine you could. If the offense started with the ball already in the opponent's end zone, then the expected points added for that play would be 6, the value of a touchdown. Conversely, if the offense started with the ball at their own end zone, then the EPA for that play would be -2, the value of a safety, which puts points on the board for the opponent. Every part of the field has an EPA value associated with it, and those values are based on historical data. But here's one more thing we need to add here to get an accurate EPA value, and that's down and distance. I think we all inherently know that 1st and 10 from the 50-yard line gives you a much better chance to score a touchdown than 3rd and 10 from the 45, but how much more? Here's where we can pull out our trusty EPA value spreadsheet from Brian Burke of ESPN and compare. Please note though, these numbers are based on the 2000 to 2008 seasons and may be slightly off from where they are today, but this was the best resource I could find readily available online. I'll link it in the description. So, if it's 1st and 10 from the 50, we'll be sure we're on our first down tab, find the yard line mark, 50 more yards to go, and align it with the 1st and 10 column. A team starting here would have an EPA of 2.04 on this drive. For 3rd and 10 from the 45, we go to our 3rd down tab, find the yard line mark, 45, and align it with the 10-yard column. A team in this situation would have an EPA of 1.09. So, the team on the 50 can expect about 1 more point on average for this drive than the team on the 45. Now, to calculate how much a turnover is worth, we need to add just one more layer onto this EPA discussion, and that's how we calculate the EPA of a singular play. This part is pretty easy actually, it just connects one moment to the next. How valuable or detrimental was the move from one play to the next one? Let's look at Kyren Williams' fumble at the start of the 4th quarter in the Rams-Eagles game. Los Angeles has the ball on their own 43 in a 2nd and 2. With this, their EPA on this drive is 1.66. However, After the fumble and an Isaiah Rodgers recovery down to LA's 10-yard line, the Eagles now have the ball with a first down and goal to go. Philadelphia then has an EPA of 4.74 on their newfound possession, meaning the Rams would have an EPA of negative 4.74 in this situation. To find the value of that fumble, we take the resulting EPA and subtract it from the original one. In this case, we take negative 4.75 and subtract it from 1.66, giving us a negative 6.4 EPA from that play alone, essentially a touchdown. It makes the fact that the Rams defense held Philly to a field goal here all the more impressive. Yes, they gave up 3 points, but in a sense, they also saved 3.4 for their offense. If you're suspicious of internet creators like me, then you're probably worrying that I promised to give you a value for turnovers only to say, they're actually all different. But me, I wouldn't do that to you. I'm one of the good ones. Trust me. Oh, and don't forget to comment your social security number down below for a chance to win a brand new PS5. I think it's just as valuable to have a general number/rule of thumb for how much these things are worth, since it's unlikely you'll have your trusty EPA spreadsheet handy at the bar. Plus, when you do go calculate them, you'll already have a baseline for which ones were more or less detrimental to a team's chances of winning on average. One of the more famous solutions to determining this number was also one of the first. It came from the 1988 book, The Hidden Game of Football, a book I've mentioned before and that I can't recommend enough. They used an idealized linear relationship for field position and EPA, and found the 50-yard line is worth about 2 points for either team. Using this, they concluded that a turnover anywhere on the field will generally be worth a 4-point swing. The Sports Ratings blog summarized, saying, "The turnover can happen anywhere on the field, and the offense's loss and defense's gain add up to roughly the same amount in lost and new opportunity totaled. A fumble at the 10-yard line is either a huge offensive mistake, but a minor gift to the other side, or on your own 10-yard line, it costs the offense very little, but gives the other team a huge opportunity." Other reputable sources like Football Outsiders have tried to find a more accurate number and ways to differentiate between fumbles and interceptions, but they've almost universally found values between 3.5 and 4.5. And so, if you want to be someone that takes in all the info, with the bonus of sounding smart by referencing a book, understand that while every turnover is different, they're generally worth about 4 points. One caveat to keep in mind are the plays that function as turnovers but aren't counted as such on the spreadsheet. Plays like turnovers on downs and missed field goals act as turnovers but aren't marked that way. And yes, you could argue then any change of possession is a turnover, but a punt on 4th down could actually improve your EPA by flipping the field and not risking a turnover on downs. For example, if it's 4th down at your own 35-yard line, you generally have an EPA of negative 0.62. If you can punt the ball to the opponent's 25-yard line, then they will begin their drive with a 0.58 EPA, meaning the punting team is now at negative 0.58. Going from negative 0.62 to negative 0.58 means the punting team actually gained a small amount of value from their decision. So far, in these NFL playoffs, there have been 24 total turnovers. And in a few of these games, turnovers were essentially the whole story. Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, and Jordan Love threw a collective 11 interceptions across their games. Their teams all lost the turnover battle in large part due to them. Across all of these contests, they lost the turnover battle by 10. The point differential on aggregate for these games? 46. Are you starting to believe that turnovers are generally worth 4 points yet? The Ravens' turnovers against the Bills practically decide the game. Yes, Baltimore put together a great second half and were a Mark Andrews catch away from possibly sending this one into overtime, but had the Ravens just taken care of the ball, we probably never would have gotten to that point. In a game they lost by just 2 points, they lost an expected 11.7 on a poorly thrown interception, a strip sack, and a Mark Andrews fumble. On Lamar Jackson's strip sack early in the second quarter, that was probably the most impactful of the three, losing an expected 6.67 points. That's the power of starting with the ball deep in the opponent's territory to ending without the ball with the field flipped. By my calculation, the most deadly turnover to this point was Sam Darnold's sack fumble in the Vikings wildcard game against the Rams. The Vikings began the play in a 3rd and 7 on LA's 38, meaning they could expect this drive ending with 1.81 points on average. Instead, the Rams ended up with the ball in the end zone, and because extra points are hit with around 93% accuracy, we can count this as a 6.93 EPA for LA. So, with all that in mind, in a single play, Minnesota lost 8.74 expected points. And for all the shit that Jameis Williams' trick play interception got, it was one of the tamer interceptions by EPA impact, landing at just negative 2.92. Of course, football isn't played on a spreadsheet, and this is a good example of a play that has a bigger impact on the flow of the game than it does in terms of EPA. Just about everyone who saw that play in real time, and especially now in retrospect, could point to it as the haymaker to end Detroit's once magical season. Turnovers are one of the biggest deciding factors in games, and that's especially the case in the playoffs where the best teams are built to force you into mistakes and then capitalize on them. EPA is one of those things that's probably overused at this point, but I think it does a nice job of illustrating just how impactful losing a possession can be for a team. There's a reason why teams that keep it close in a game where they lose the turnover battle have to outgain and outperform the other team in almost every other facet. The Ravens had more first downs, outgained Buffalo by nearly 150 yards, and were better on third down. But if you're going to turn the ball over more than your opponent, you'll be forced to be nearly flawless through everything else, and even that might not be enough. The impact of a turnover can be difficult to fully suss out in real time. Keep the general 4-point swing rule in mind, and you'll have a better sense of what teams are dealing with after a turnover. While the score may be tied at that moment, the group that just gave the ball away is playing from behind. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to give it a like if you did enjoy it and consider subscribing to the channel so you can catch the next one. Thanks, bye.